Hi, I'm Candace.
And I'm Belle.
And welcome back to our Closing the Early Literacy Gap podcast.
Candace, do you want to tell everybody who this podcast is for?
Absolutely. Our podcast is for parents, teachers, administrators, or anybody else who's interested in early literacy. Belle and I have a huge passion for early literacy, and we're really excited to share our voice with everybody else.
Absolutely. Okay, in this episode, this is episode 4.
Yes, we made it!
I know.
Episode 4.
Episode 4. Okay, so we are going to talk about just the basic things that you should do to start kids off in their early literacy journey. So we're going to be talking like a lot of this is going to be parents, but maybe, preschool teachers, the young kids.
Yes.
And just anybody who are working with kids, from the very beginning. What do you do at the very beginning for kids? Is there anything you can do at the very beginning for kids?
Yes. And like we talked about in previous podcasts, starting early is crucial.
Yes, it's very, very crucial. And that's kind of going to be our thing, right? We're going to keep talking about how start early, because it's so important.
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to start off by talking about the simple view of reading. So this is a model. It's a very, very simple model that was developed by a person named P.B. Gough. And it's basically just like 3 blocks.
Yep.
And the first block says language comprehension. And the second block says word recognition. And then there's a time sign between them and that's very important because it's a product. It's not a sum.
Yes.
So, and then you have an equal sign. And then the third box says like reading comprehension, right? Because the main reason to read is to be able to comprehend what you're reading,
right? To
gain information from reading. And so the simple view says language comprehension times word recognition equals reading comprehension. And it's important that it's times because if any of those things are missing, if you don't have any language comprehension and you have word recognition, then you still can't do reading comprehension.
Right.
Or the other way around. If you have language comprehension, but you have no word reading, then you can't comprehend what you're reading.
And it doesn't matter how fast you read. If you don't understand what you're reading, doesn't matter.
And one great example is if I was to read, say, Portuguese.
Okay.
I probably could passably word recognize. I could read the words, but I don't know Portuguese at all. I might actually be able to pick out like this one might mean this because I know a little bit of Spanish.
Right.
I know some Spanish. And so I might be able to pick some out, but I would have no reading comprehension. I would not be able to comprehend anything, even though I could probably, because a lot of the sounds, are very similar. I could probably read. I wouldn't be able to comprehend anything.
Right.
Yes. And then of course, you can't, if you can't read word recognize words, then you can't. But both of those are important. So we're going to talk about a few things that you can do with young children to help them with language comprehension as well as word recognition.
Yes.
Okay. So what's the first thing, Candace, people should be doing with their children or with the children that they're working with, young children, to help them be successful in language comprehension?
I love this because this is something so simple but gets overlooked so often. It's just talking with your kids. The more you talk with your child, the better things are, because the more words you use for them, the more words that they are exposed to, that they can develop an understanding and then link to other.
Okay, so should you even use words with them that they don't know the meaning of?
All day, every day.
All day, every day. And so how does that work?
Okay. So I have a 2-year-old and
I saw you with your 2-year-old yesterday and you did really well.
Well, thank you. I have a 2-year-old and she is the baby I am a mother of 5. So she is the 5th.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when you have that baby, older siblings talk for them. And so the babies don't grow that language as fast as maybe your older children do, right? Because people are constantly talking to them, or it's just, oh my goodness, they're pitching a fit. Just give it to them, please. Just, and so with my kiddo, what I do is yesterday, actually, she was pitching a fit. She wanted something that her older sister had. And she was just whining about it. And I knew what she wanted.
She had her binky in her mouth.
She had her binky in her mouth. Older sister knew what she wanted. I knew what she wanted. But I said, nope, you can't be pitching a fit. Like, that's not how we communicate. You need to use your words.
Yes, and that's what I heard you say over and over again. Use your words. Use your words. Take your binky out.
Take your binky out. Use your words. And it took her a minute. And you know, finally she was able to say, please, you know, and then I want the pink one, right? Because she wanted the pink ribbon. But she was able to finally get there.
Right.
And her sister did not give her the pink ribbon until she expressed herself in a correct manner.
Well, and it's tempting as adults, especially when we're busy and you don't want the whining and the fit to just give into it, and you know what they want, just give them what they want and move on. But having them use their words, teaching them that communication is so important, and that words are so important for communication.
Yes.
Is really huge. And I think it's important that you stated that your older daughter knew not to give her, because that's something that I found with my youngest. He's 14 now, but when he was young, he's 5 years younger than I have 4 children. He's 5 years younger than the third. So my older kids were all closer in age, and he was the baby. And I started to realize he's really getting spoiled. And I'm like, he would cry for things, and I would just like, nope, we're not giving him those things. And then I started to notice the older kids were giving into him, you know, and I had to say, no, don't give it to him. But he wants it. I don't really want it. I'm like,
I understand. I love that.
But right. You need to know that I care about his development, and I don't want him to be spoiled, and I don't want him to not learn how to ask for things. So that's really important. It's important that you recognize those kinds of things in talking to your child. Okay. I want to read this quote by Jim Trelease, because I think it's so great. It comes from this book. It's called the Read Aloud Handbook. And I read this years ago. This is an old copy of it, but I just love this book so much. And he's got a lot of stuff in here about language. And he talks about a study, which we'll go into more detail. And that's another good point. We're going to just, in this episode, we're just going to briefly go through each of these things, but we're going to do another episode on each of these things. So we'll do an upcoming episode on language comprehension and talking to your child, to your child in general. But I did want to read this quote. It's not the toys in the house that make the difference in children's lives. It's the words in their heads. The least expensive thing we can give a child outside of a hug turns out to be the most valuable. Words.
Which I think is so powerful.
It is.
So powerful. I mean, even when kids are playing with toys, how often are we like, awesome, they're playing, and we leave them alone? You know, when you can actually talk with them through it. Oh, what are you doing? What are you making?
Yes.
Oh, what shape is that?
Right.
Why are you doing that?
Or even, and we'll go into some of this more stuff, but just games you can play with them, like I Spy.
Yes.
You know, when you play games like that, you're using words, you're teaching them how to describe things. Or when you go to the store, you can say, okay, which one of these things is soft? Which one of these things is hard? You can talk about, like, what do we use this cleaning supply for? You know, like, just different things that you can just be taking advantage of just throughout your day with whatever you're doing.
Yep.
It's so easy to just want to like
just go through the motions and get it done.
Especially in this day and age we live in, people are into their headphones, they're into their own stuff, but we've got to keep talking to the kids. So,
okay.
Talking to your child. We've spent enough time on that.
Yep.
What's the next thing?
The next thing, reading to your child. And not, I mean, and I think parents, you know, have a hard time going, well, what should I read to my kid? Right. You know, I have a toddler, so we're going to focus on picture books. And picture books are great, right?
Yes.
But the words in the picture books are what's more important. But
they can also prompt conversations, right? So that reminds me of another quote in here.
Yes.
In this book. Let me see if I can
quickly
catch
find
that one really quick.
Yes. When you're reading to your child, you should often make sure that you're asking them comprehension questions, or even allow them to ask questions, because they're going to, well, what does that mean? Or what are they saying? Or what is this picture about? Or what is this? I think giving your child opportunity to ask those questions and understand what is being read to them, even if it's a simple picture book, is so very crucial and important. Did you find that quote?
I did not find that quote, but we'll have it in our next episode. We talk more about this. But basically, it was just talking about how when you're reading to kids, when you're watching a video or a movie or something like that, and you know, like the animals, they go across the screen really fast, right? Do you remember where that is?
Yes.
I just think that's such a great.
I will find it.
Okay, super. And while you find that, I want to talk a little bit more about reading, and like, especially, I know some of you out there maybe don't speak the language. I've had parents that I've tried to tell them things that they can do to help their child, and they're like, but I don't know how to pronounce it right because they speak another language at their home. Yes. And I think that's wonderful. And I want to make this point that kids learning other languages is actually really helpful to them too. Oh, you found it. Perfect. I did. I don't know why I didn't have it marked. That kids learning other languages is actually really good for them too. But you can also learn the language by doing this with your kids. And reading is a really great way. But there's also, there's so many apps now and videos. There's a storyline online that we like to show our kids where movie stars are reading books to kids.
And
there's
shows the
audio books.
Yes.
So don't use an excuse that you don't know the language very well to expose them to great books, because there's so many, many, many options now that you can. And we can talk about that more. But this is what I wanted to read. This is so great. In a typical film, the image of an insect speeds across the screen at a pace of 24 frames per second. In a 2-hour film, that would be more than 170,000 frames, few of which could be studied for details. As soon as you stop the film, the image blurs, right? Although I would say videos are getting a little bit better about that. But the point is still really good. Yeah. On a page, the insect's image remains in focus and in one place, allowing the child to scrutinize it for details. And how much easier it is to scrutinize a book than the screen anyway, right?
Yes.
Because visual literacy comes before print literacy. 2/3 of the questions and comments from young children are about illustrations. So, this goes right back to what we were talking about talking to your child, using books as catalysts to talk to your child. So not only is it the words in the book, and there are more rare words in books than there are in any conversation. Yes. So you're getting, that's another big thing I got from this book. Yeah. So reading books and using books is better for a couple reasons. More words plus more opportunities to talk about stuff.
Right.
Okay. So that's language comprehension. What about word recognition? Okay. So the other block in the simple view. Yes. Are there things that we could or should be doing with kids to help them learn how to recognize words and actually read words?
Well, I think that dives into the question of parents taking responsibility and going, well, should I be teaching them this? Should I be the one teaching my child?
Or even, should we teach them too young? Is it damaging to teach kids at too young of an age? There's a lot of people that question that also. So we want to address that.
And I think with my experience, and I have taught all the way from 2 years, 9 months, all the way up through first grade. And at 2 years, 9 months is when the school that I was working at started teaching kids letters and sound and blending.
Okay. Yeah.
At 2 years, 9 months.
They could totally do it.
So by the time they were 3, they were already reading CVC words and even sentences. And it's
CVC
amazing.
Words are consonant, vowel, consonant.
Yes.
What I make sure.
And that's how my older children learned, because they went to that school. Right.
Yeah, right.
And it's amazing how far along they are in reading because of that. And so I think teaching kids young and teaching kids corresponding letters with the sound, right? Their names and the sound is so important.
Right. Well, and that brings me to phonemic awareness.
Yes.
Which we're going to talk about in our next episode, an intense panel of educators who who scoured through all the research. The National Reading Panel is what it's called. We're going to talk about that next time. But one of the things that they found was the number one things is phonemic awareness, teaching phonemic awareness. And that's something that can be done at a really young age. And what phonemic awareness is just being aware of sounds in words. Yeah. And you can do this by playing rhyming games, by clapping syllables, by
tapping out each individual sound.
Yep, exactly. And so, but there's a little bit of confusion between the difference between phonemic awareness and phonics. I always thought they were the same until just the last few years. Yep. But they're not the same. Phonemic awareness is awareness of the sounds. And whereas phonics is associating those sounds with the picture, with a grapheme, with the letter, right?
Yep.
And making that connection. So but
one is more visual, one's more auditory.
Right. And people say, well, you can do phonemic awareness in the dark. Yes. Because you can hear the sounds in the dark.
Yes.
But and that's something you can do with little kids right from the beginning. Do you hear your name? And even starting with their names.
Yeah.
Your name starts with K, helping them to hear the sounds, because especially they'll say things like this student I had in my class on February 2nd came in the door saying, "It's hound ha day. It's hound ha hey." Oh, she said hey.
Hound ha
hey. Hound ha hey. And I couldn't figure out what she was saying. Then I realized she was trying to tell me it was Groundhog Day. And this is a girl who does not speak English as her first language.
Yes.
She's still learning the sounds in English. But I thought that was a really great example of how kids can hear the sounds wrong. And they're just hearing kind of an overall. So helping them hear that Groundhog Day. And I think the day part, like, because I said, you mean Groundhog Day. Today is a day to learn about the groundhog. So that when it was like that aha for her, day, like being aware of that, just hearing those sounds, you can and should be doing with young children at a very young age to help them distinguish between words. But also you can do it with actual letters and teach them the sounds of the letters as you do it.
Yes,
absolutely.
And I think that's so important too. When I was teaching the young kids letters and sounds, what I personally did is I put pictures of animals in, because an animal has a name and a sound.
Yeah.
And so I taught them these letters, just like animals have a name and a sound, right? Like this is a cow says moo. This is letter A says ah. Right. And so I mixed them up so they would go cow, moo, A, ah, B, buh. And so it was just teaching them like, oh, it's no different than an animal.
Right. Well, and if you think about what we were talking about earlier with your 2-year-old.
Yes.
Right. Kids first learn to communicate using sounds.
Yes.
Crying.
Yes.
But this is helping them understand the complexity of language that you can actually refine what you mean by using more explicit sounds.
Yes.
And helping them hear those sounds. So that's all super important for helping them to learn how to word recognize. And then, like we said, throwing those letters in. I put letters up on the walls for my girls to learn when they were young, and my oldest just picked up on it. And some kids will do that. They'll pick up, she watched Sesame Street, and if there's so many shows and stuff like read Between the Lions. Did you ever see that show?
I remember Between the Lions. My sister loved that.
That was the show my girls watched when they were little. And there's a lot of really great stuff that teaches in there. But like I said, my oldest, in the our first episode, I guess it was, when I told about how my oldest daughter taught herself how to read, she just picked it up from all that and from me reading to her, just doing all this stuff. But my other daughter, I did all the same things with her, and she didn't make the connection between letters, and so we will have other further episodes about learning disabilities, dyslexia, and knowing that. But some people, we just want to say, like, don't give up if they're struggling.
Yeah.
If they're like, they don't get the letters, I'll be like, they don't really get it, so I'm not going to teach them. I'll like wait and let the school teach them.
Right.
Or maybe they're not ready yet. A lot of people say, kids will read when they're ready.
Don't wait for them to fail before you take action.
Yes.
Is the worst thing you can do.
Exactly. Oh, and I have a quote in here about that too, about, and I think this is a really important, right here. A research study by Berninger in 2000 found that students identified with dyslexia need more than 20 times the practice than students without dyslexia to learn letter sequences. And that was definitely true about my daughter. And this is something that we want to really emphasize here as we kind of wrap up this quick talk about some things you can do, is don't give up.
Yeah.
And if your child is experiencing struggles, remember this. You can learn anything with enough repetitions.
Yes.
And I this really quick little story, this kid in one of my classes, I was working with some kids who were really struggling readers. And so I would work with them, and then I'd say, let's do it again. And I kept telling them, you can learn anything with enough repetitions. You can learn anything with enough repetitions. We just need to try it again. We need to do it again. And I try to make it fun. And that's an important thing too.
Yes.
Find ways to make it fun.
Yes.
But I had him repeat it at one point, and he said, those repetitions. But it was funny, but the fact that I had taught them that that's what you need. And so don't get discouraged.
He had heard that saying.
Yes.
You have gave him so many repetitions on that saying.
We just need more repetitions. We just need more repetitions. So, he knew that it was hard, but it can keep them from getting discouraged.
Absolutely.
It can help them know, okay, we just need to do it again. We just need to do it again and again. And then as they do start to learn things, they say, I've seen this one enough. I know this one now.
Yep.
So, and then also keeping it fun as much as you can. So Candace, do you have some ideas of how they can keep it fun?
Oh my gosh. There's so, I could go on we should do an episode of just games.
That's a great idea.
Of stuff you can do, because I could go on forever about all these different ideas, and I'm just one person. And I know there's so many educators out there who are like, oh, but I've done this too.
Oh, yeah,
and I've done this. And so there are literally
so share your ideas with us.
Share your ideas with us. Yes, please. Because we would love to bring up different ideas of games and things that you can do with your children, not only at home, but in the classroom as well. Just things that make it more fun. So it's not this tedious, arduous.
Listen to those
I need rest.
Arduous.
I'm going to tap those out, rep it lots of times. It's going to be great.
Yes.
Oh, those repetitions. But just something where it's not painful.
Right.
Because if you have a negative experience, especially with a student or a child who is struggling, they are already frustrated and they are already diving down to go, I can't do this because it's hard.
So we'll have an episode to help you when you get those moments with kids, to help give you some ideas about that kind of stuff. So email us at candiceandbell@gmail.com. That's KANDICEANDBEL@gmail.com. And give us your ideas, give us your games, give us your questions, and we'll be creating more content later to help us know.
Yes. So thank you so much for joining us for episode 4.
Yes.
We can't wait to see you again for episode 5.
Which will be about that research study that I told you about, that panel, the National Reading Panel, and the Big 5. So we're doing this with episode 5, the Big 5 things that panel found are the 5 most important things that kids need to learn how to read. So we'll be doing that next time.
Okay.
Join us then.
See you later.
Bye.